The cops arrived before the keys ever did. Malcolm Reeves stood silently in the dealership lot, loan documents in hand, while two officers questioned him like he'd snuck in rather than shown up ready to buy. He came to purchase a luxury SUV, but within minutes he was being treated like a criminal. The lot shimmered beneath the Carolina sun as Malcolm Reeves stepped out of his silver 2010 Acura TL. The car had served him loyally through a decade of client meetings, cross-country security briefings, and late-night drives back from data centers. Its leather seats had worn thin, and the console's Bluetooth gave up sometime in 2019, but it had been dependable. Still, today wasn't about sentiment. Today was about moving forward. After years of working overtime, fighting for contract renewals, and finally landing a federal upgrade that doubled his compensation, Malcolm had decided it was time to get the one thing he'd been eyeing for years, a 2024 Yukon Denali XL. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't dreaming. He had full financing in his hand, the vehicle specs memorized, and a printed letter of pre-approval folded neatly inside his jacket. Dressed in a pressed navy button-down clean chinos and a leather wristwatch his sister gave him last Christmas, Malcolm walked with the quiet assurance of a man who had earned this moment. The front entrance of Hamilton Prestige Motors gleamed with glass and chrome, promising luxury service and sophistication. But the moment he stepped through the doors, the temperature shifted, not literally, but in that subtle, almost imperceptible way that makes the air feel heavier. A young salesman looked up from behind a desk. Early 20s, thin pale, sandy blonde hair cropped short. The name tag read, Chase. "Hey there. Yeah, can I help you?" Malcolm smiled, extending a firm but polite handshake. "Afternoon. I'm looking to test drive the 2024 Denali XL. Summit White if you got it. Trim 5SA. Chase blinked. "That's one of our higher-end models. It's not cheap." "I'm aware." Malcolm reached into his jacket and pulled out the letter. "Financing's through Palmetto First Credit. I've got the full pre-approval here." Chase barely glanced at the paper. "Right. Let me see if it's on the lot. They're usually kept in back. You mind waiting a minute?" Malcolm nodded. Chase disappeared behind the showroom divider with the kind of urgency that said he didn't want to be seen talking for long. Malcolm took a step back and glanced around. The dealership wasn't busy. A couple inspecting a Tahoe. An older man drinking vending machine coffee. But no sense of hustle. No one greeting him. No clipboard. No, "Let me get that vehicle pulled around for you, sir." Instead, after about 2 minutes, someone else emerged, Don Whitaker, the dealership manager. Mid-50s, pressed slacks, a Bluetooth earpiece still hanging in his ear from a call he just ended. He didn't smile. "You're here for the Denali?" Don asked. "Yes, sir." Malcolm offered the folder again. "All my paperwork is in there." Don didn't take it. "Just curious what's making you choose that model." Malcolm raised an eyebrow but answered calmly. "I travel a lot. Need something with capacity and highway performance? The Denali hits all the marks. Comfort, safety tech." "You got a big family, no?" Malcolm said. "But I have a niece and a nephew. I take places on weekends. Helps to have space." Don nodded, but it was the kind of nod people give when they're pretending to process, not actually listening. "And what field are you in?" "I work in cybersecurity," Malcolm replied. "I manage infrastructure for government contracts." "Uh-huh." Another pause. Don finally motioned toward the back. "Let me go check if the keys are available. We keep them locked for certain models." As Don stepped away, Malcolm exhaled. It was happening again, not outright, not loud. Just the slow drip of doubt. The vetting that only comes when you don't look the part of what someone thinks a buyer should be. He walked out toward the vehicle area anyway, past the glass doors, and into the fenced-off section behind the service lane. There it was, the Summit White Denali XL. Chrome wheels glistening, jet black interior with contrast stitching, the sunroof, the adaptive cruise sensors visible beneath the grille. Just like in the brochure he'd bookmarked a year ago. But still no keys. No one came out. Just Malcolm standing next to the SUV like an extra in someone else's commercial. 10 minutes passed. The dealership windows reflected nothing but vague movement behind glass. Then a whisper of movement. He spotted Chase and Don again. They weren't holding keys. They weren't moving toward him. They were watching, whispering, one with arms folded, one scrolling a tablet. Malcolm checked his watch. He was supposed to pick up dinner for his sister after this, maybe drop off some snacks for the kids. But now time felt foggy, like it belonged to someone else. He turned to head back inside. But before he could step fully through the door, he heard a car pull in fast but quiet. Black and white SUV, no lights, but police. Two officers stepped out, one tall, late 30s, black uniform shirt unbuttoned at the collar. The other, younger female, hand resting near her belt. "Sir," the taller one said as they approached. "Can we speak with you a moment?" Malcolm's stomach didn't drop. Not anymore. That response had been trained out of him. He just nodded. "What's this about?" "We got a call from the dealership. Something about potential fraudulent documents. You match the description." Malcolm pulled out his ID. "My name is Malcolm Reeves. I'm here to test drive a Denali. My documents are valid. You can call the credit union if you want." The female officer, Officer Hill, took the documents. She reviewed them silently while her partner kept one hand inches from his holster, not threatening, but not neutral either. From the edge of the lot, a woman in a navy blazer and jeans watched. She looked like she'd been sitting in the waiting area earlier. Her phone was up, angled low but steady. She wasn't scrolling. She was recording. The officers conferred quietly. Hill spoke first. "Everything checks out, Mr. Reeves. Your financing is legit. Your ID matches." "Of course it does," Malcolm said. "You can also check the timestamps from when I walked in. I told them exactly what I wanted. Gave them the documents. They stalled. Then you showed up." From the corner of the lot, the woman with the phone took a few steps closer. Her voice rang out even and steady. "I've been here the whole time," she said. He was polite. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there while they stared at him like he didn't belong. Hill looked over. "Ma'am, are you recording?" "Yes." "Would you be willing to share that footage with us?" She nodded and held up her phone. "My name is Sloan Marlowe. I teach civics at Alcott High. I've seen enough of this in textbooks. This time I got it on film." Inside, the dealership grew still. Chase disappeared from view. Don stood motionless. Malcolm, for his part, said nothing more. He had learned that silence, when worn correctly, carried weight. The officers left shortly after, quietly confirming no wrongdoing. Malcolm walked back to his car, not the Denali, not the one he had dreamed of, but his old Acura. He sat for a moment. No calls, no radio, just breathing. Behind him, Sloan uploaded the video. Caption: "He came to buy." They called the cops. By nightfall, the storm had already started, but Malcolm didn't know it yet. He just knew one thing: he wasn't going to be silent about this. The video was only 3 minutes long. No yelling, no outbursts. Just a man standing still while two police officers asked for his ID in the middle of a car dealership lot. But by the time the sun set on Columbia, South Carolina, it had been shared over 80,000 times. A black man in business, casual loan papers in hand, politely answering questions, while the staff who had called the police on him watched from behind tinted showroom glass. And beside him, a stranger, a teacher, filming with quiet purpose. That was how it started. Chapter 1 ended with silence, but by dawn the internet was roaring. Hashtags flared across timelines. Chur driving while black. Chusher Hamilton Motors. Chusher buying, not begging. People didn't need a narrator. The footage spoke for itself. The calm, the humiliation, the restraint, the truth you couldn't edit. Hamilton Prestige Motors woke up the next morning to thousands of notifications. Their Google reviews plummeted from 4.6 to 2.1 stars overnight. The dealership's Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. "Do you call the cops on every customer or just the black ones? You just lost my business forever." Racism with a name tag. Inside the building, Don Whitaker, the manager who had asked Malcolm how big his family was before even looking at his documents, sat at his desk, pale-faced and speechless. The office phone didn't stop ringing. And Chase, the young salesman who had given Malcolm the cold shoulder and whispered instead of helping, was nowhere to be seen. He'd called out sick. In truth, he'd spent most of the night trying to lock down his Instagram and scrub his LinkedIn, but it was too late. Screenshots of his profile had already circulated with captions like, "Found him." While the dealership scrambled to draft a bland PR statement, Malcolm Reeves sat at home in silence. He hadn't posted anything. He hadn't even watched the full video. He didn't need to. He remembered every second of it, every stall, every sidestep, every sideways glance. But what surprised him were the messages. By noon, his inbox had filled with emails from strangers. Some just said thank you. Others shared long paragraphs about similar stories being followed in stores, being asked if they belonged at their own office buildings, being told sorry it's out of stock while watching someone else buy it minutes later. And there were the press requests, local news, national morning shows, podcast producers. Everyone wanted a quote, a reaction, a headline. But Malcolm wasn't ready for sound bites. He didn't want a spotlight. He wanted to breathe. That afternoon, a message came through from a name he recognized, Tasha Monroe, a regional journalist who had covered civil rights stories across the state. She didn't pitch a narrative. She just wrote, "I saw the video. If you ever feel like talking, just talking, not performing, I'd like to listen." No camera crew, just a table and two voices. Malcolm didn't reply right away. He closed his laptop and went for a walk around his neighborhood instead. He passed by a neighbor mowing their lawn, a couple walking their dog, a group of teenagers shooting hoops in a driveway. None of them knew what had happened yesterday. None of them looked at him differently. But in his mind, the spotlight was everywhere now, like heat you can't see, but still feel. The next morning, Hamilton Prestige Motors released a brief statement. "We regret the misunderstanding that occurred and are reviewing our procedures to ensure all customers are treated with respect and fairness." The internet shredded it within minutes. Say his name. That's not an apology. That's corporate insulation. Misunderstanding. You called the police on a man with full financing. Meanwhile, the video climbed to 1 million views. Celebrities retweeted it. Activists dissected it. Think pieces filled news feeds with titles like "Dignity Deferred" and "What Happens When Calm Isn't Enough." Finally, Malcolm agreed to speak with Tasha Monroe. They met at a small public library conference room, no cameras, just a voice recorder and 2 chairs. Tasha clicked it on and asked simply, "What do you want people to understand?" Malcolm leaned forward, hands clasped. "It wasn't about the car. It never was. I came in prepared. I knew what I wanted. I had the money, the credentials, the pre-approval. But I still wasn't seen as a buyer. I was seen as a question mark. And that's the part that sticks." Tasha asked if he wanted an apology. He shook his head. "I wanted respect. You can't give that after the fact. You either show it up front or you don't." By the time the interview was published online, something else had happened. Quietly, privately. Another dealership across town, Franklin and Barnes Automotive, reached out through email. The message came from Derek Barnes, the co-owner. It was short and direct. "Mr. Reeves, I saw what happened to you and I'm sorry. Not as a dealer, as a man. If you're still looking for a vehicle, we'd be honored to serve you with full transparency and respect. No pressure, just an offer." Malcolm stared at the message for a while. He didn't trust it right away. Who would, but something about the tone didn't feel performative. It felt human. 2 days later, with no cameras, no reporters, and no fanfare, Malcolm pulled into Franklin and Barnes. This time, the greeting was simple. Derek Barnes met him at the door, shook his hand and said, "You tell us what you need. We'll make it happen." No one asked him where he worked. No one asked how many kids he had. No one stalled. They ran the numbers. They reviewed the trim options. They found the exact 2024 Yukon Denali XL he had wanted, summit white chrome wheels, panoramic roof. No locked drawers, no sideways glances. Just a business transaction. Just the way it should have been the first time. 2 hours later, Malcolm drove off the lot. And this time, he wasn't just driving a new car. He was reclaiming something that had been denied to him, his dignity as a customer, his right to walk into a place without being treated like a risk. As he pulled into his driveway, he parked the SUV and sat there for a minute, hands on the wheel, not moving. Not out of disbelief, but because he wanted to remember what this was supposed to feel like all along. Not special, not exceptional, just normal. What came next wouldn't be normal. The story wasn't over. The footage was still spreading. Malcolm still hadn't spoken on social media, but now he knew he'd say something soon. Not for likes, not for outrage, for clarity. For every person who had stood where he stood and walked out without the keys, without the deal, and without their voice being heard. It was never just about the car. It was about what it took to be allowed to buy it. Would you like me to write chapter 3 in the same tone and structure? The Yukon Denali sat in Malcolm's driveway like a trophy no one clapped for. After 2 hours of paperwork, one firm handshake, and a transaction that went exactly how it should have the first time he drove it home in quiet. No fanfare, no press, just a slow cruise through Columbia's side streets until he pulled up to the curb outside his brick townhome, cut the engine, and exhaled. He didn't take a photo, didn't text anyone, didn't even get out of the car right away, because owning it wasn't the victory being allowed to buy it like anyone else was. That was what made it feel like a win, and still it felt heavy. 3 days passed. The Denali remained untouched. Malcolm used the Acura for errands. It wasn't that he didn't want to drive the new SUV. It was that it felt like driving. It would somehow validate a process that should have been clean, but had been stained before it even began. He needed time. Time to reflect, time to let it settle, and time to figure out what, if anything, he would say next. But the world wasn't waiting. The video Sloan Marlowe had posted had crossed 3 million views. Major media outlets ran segments with titles like Calm Under Pressure, A Man, a Car, and a Call. Think pieces ask questions they should have asked years ago about perception bias and the 1,000 paper cuts Black Americans endure in daily life. Messages came in from everywhere: executives, janitors, teachers, bus drivers. Some offered solidarity. Others shared stories of their own, followed in a store, challenged at a job interview, ignored at a restaurant, while others were greeted with warmth. But one message hit different. It came from a 24-year-old warehouse manager in Akron, Ohio. I was ready to quit my job last week. Got accused of stealing a pack of gloves I brought from home. Your story helped me hold my head higher. I stayed. Thank you. Malcolm read that message 3 times. Then he opened his photo app, snapped a picture of the Denali in front of his house, and uploaded it to his Instagram with a caption that took him 6 minutes to type, but only 6 words to say dignity isn't a luxury add-on. It should come standard. The post exploded. No hashtags, no explanation, just truth. And suddenly the conversation wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about the quiet lines so many people had waited in, only to be told to wait somewhere else. It was about the moments when silence became survival, and how that silence often cost something more permanent than pride. Malcolm granted 2 more interviews, one to a national outlet, the other to a podcast focused on race and dignity in America. When asked what justice looked like to him, he didn't hesitate. It's not revenge. It's not even an apology. It's walking into a place and being treated like a customer instead of a threat. That's it. That's the whole ask. Meanwhile, Hamilton Prestige Motors was hemorrhaging credibility. Don Whitaker was quietly let go, resigned according to the press release, but no one believed that. Chase's name disappeared from the staff page, and the dealership announced a new community engagement initiative that included sensitivity training and partnerships with local advocacy groups. But to most, it read like damage control, the kind you do after the lights are already broken. The kind that comes after you've lost the trust, not before. Malcolm didn't respond to their new statement. He didn't need to. His silence said everything they hadn't. The town was watching, the country was watching, but more importantly, future customers were watching. That weekend, he finally opened the Denali's door and let his goddaughter and nephew climb in. They were 7 and 9, too young to know all the details, but old enough to feel the difference between being welcomed and being watched. "You got the big car, Uncle Mal," his nephew shouted from the 3rd-row seat. "It smells like rich people in here." His goddaughter giggled, kicking her feet. Malcolm laughed for the first time in days. A full laugh. Not a polite chuckle. He pulled out of the driveway, sunroof open, music, low, just cruising. Not to show off, not to reclaim anything, just to enjoy what he'd earned. At a red light, a man in a pickup truck pulled alongside him, middle-aged, ball cap, worn flannel. He glanced at Malcolm, then at the car, then back at Malcolm. There was no smirk, no nod of disapproval, just a slow, respectful tilt of the head like a salute without words. Malcolm returned the nod, subtle and cool. Then the light turned green, and he drove. That night he got a call from Sloan. "You've been quiet," she said. "Letting the car speak for me," Malcolm replied. "Fair enough. I've had parents show the video in class. One kid wrote an essay about you, said he didn't yell, He just stood there, and that made me proud. Malcolm paused. I never meant to be anyone's example. Maybe not, she said, but you're somebody's reason. After they hung up, Malcolm stared out the window. The SUV gleamed in the driveway under the porch light. Not a scratch on it. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder, a stake in the ground. And what mattered now wasn't how he'd gotten it. It was how others would be treated when they tried. That week he wrote a final post. Not a thread, not a rant. Just this: I didn't speak up for attention. I spoke up because silence lets this keep happening. Say something. Every time. The shares came in like rain. And somewhere someone paused before assuming. Somewhere a manager asked a different question. Somewhere a customer was greeted with respect instead of suspicion. That was the change. Not loud, but real. And like Malcolm had said before, that's all he ever wanted. Just normal. Because when you're treated with dignity from the start, you don't have to spend the rest of your life proving you deserve it. Would you like me to now write a closing message and reflection for your channel US? Instructive stories to pair with this story. In today's story, we walk beside Malcolm Reeves not just through a car dealership, but through a quiet confrontation with prejudice, assumption, and restraint. He entered with everything he needed: full financing, research, and dignity. But instead of being treated like a customer, he was treated like a suspect. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He stood his ground with calm and clarity, and because of that, the world saw the truth for what it was. The lesson here runs deeper than one bad experience. It speaks to something many people in America, especially people of color, know all too well. Sometimes you have to prove you're not a threat just to be treated like a person. That shouldn't be the norm. Respect shouldn't be a reward for perfect behavior. It should be the starting point. Malcolm's story reminds us that dignity isn't about how loudly you speak, but how firmly you stand when you're tested. He didn't let their assumptions change his tone. He didn't let injustice define his reaction. And because of that, his silence became more powerful than any outburst could have been. For anyone who's ever been doubted, dismissed, or disrespected while doing something as simple as shopping, applying, or showing up, you are not alone. And you are not imagining it. These small indignities leave deep marks. But change doesn't come from silence. It comes from speaking up, from recording, from sharing, and from demanding that what happened to Malcolm doesn't happen to the next person. And for those watching this and wondering what they would have done, ask yourself this: are you willing to stand beside someone who's being wronged? Will you record? Will you speak? Will you challenge a system that's been quiet for too long? At US Instructive Stories, we share these moments not just to stir emotions, but to build awareness, reflection, and change. These aren't just stories, they are mirrors. What we see in them says a lot about who we are and who we still need to become. To every listener and viewer who made it to the end of this video, thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for watching with your heart open. If this story moved you, talk about it. Share it with someone. Use it to open a conversation at the dinner table, at work, or in your community. Because when we speak up, even quietly, we shine a light on what too often stays in the dark. Until next time, this is US Instructive Stories, where real moments reveal real truths. Stay aware, stay brave, and most of all, stay human.